In the Turpentine Trees by R.A. Lafferty, originally published in a collection of the author's stories entitled Four Stories in 1983, republished in another larger collection called Madman in 2023. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. In the Turpentine Trees, I will unfold my enigma to the sound of a harp. Psalm 48. Methinks it is better I should have pined away 7 of my goldenest years than that so passionate a love adventure should be lost. Charles Lamb. Now the Lord appeared by the terebinths of Mamre as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. So Genesis begins its 18th chapter. And then the Lord held a conversation with Abraham. But is the entire conversation reported to us, or is some of it left out? At other times the Lord appeared in a burning bush, in a pillar of cloud, in a pillar of fire, and in a cloud that was crammed full of thunder and lightning on Sinai mountain. But are all the words that the Lord spoke at those times reported to us, or do only a very few people know the words in their entirety? James Aegnach, his name meant either James Wisdom or Jim Grumbling, depending on who translated it from the Irish, was an amateur philosopher, an amateur tycoon in the field of rapid transit, an amateur wag, an amateur one of the 10 richest persons in the world, and an amateur lover of his fellow people. Like all true amateurs, he performed in each of these fields for the sheer love of it, and he'd have performed as meaningfully at each occupation, even that of becoming one of the 10 richest persons in the world, even if he didn't make a dime out of it. But he devoted most of his life to seeking the answers to a handful of questions which all very young boys ask themselves, and which all but a few of the boys who never grew up, like Seamus, leave off asking themselves after they grow up. To devote most of one's life to a subject such as this takes some very canny arranging. Seamus could have lived in a tub or a packing box and begged for his livelihood, but he discovered that begging for a livelihood devours more of the hours of a life than working for a livelihood does. He finally settled on the not quite satisfactory solution of becoming very wealthy quite rapidly and then hiring persons to work and worry about the details of his business while he devoted the most of his life to seeking the answers to the paramount questions. The business trick by which he became very wealthy very rapidly, by which he became one of the 10 richest persons in the world, was the Happy Hot Dog Worldwide Rapid Transit Tramway System. He had his trams running in 150 countries, and soon his system would indeed buy worldwide. Oh, they were only the ancient streetcars, but he had modernized them into becoming the streetcars of the future. They were almost completely safe and almost completely efficient and very rapid. They were transcontinental and transworld. They ran through the air like rockets, through the earth like speeding moles, and through the water like rapid fish. Seamus even had 200 kilometers of scheduled lines on the moon. The tram cars were programmed for maximum speed and efficiency and safety and pleasure, and nothing could go wrong with them in any of these departments unless something went wrong with the programming. It makes me feel almost godlike to have devised such a system, he told his first wife, Cinderella Schultz, and that brings me closer to my main interest in life. The main interest in life of Seamus Aegnach, the questions to which he sought the answers with happy and relentless passion, were such as these. Remembering that the old Egyptian priest Manetho wrote that our earth had had 7 suns before its present sun, I question whether it may not have had 7 gods before our present God. I question whether our present God would know about it if it had been the case. If there had been 7 separate and discrete eternities before or beyond our present eternity, how would any one of our present eternity know about them? If there had been 7 separate and discrete, infinite and endless and all-encompassing universes outside of our universe of record, how would anyone in our own all-encompassing universe of record know about those 7? I ask whether there is any limit to the number of one and only universes that may exist, and if there is any limit to the number of one and only universes that may exist, and if there is no limit to the number of them, why cannot I have one of my own in which to be God? But my cardinal question is, how did God get to be God? Everything depends on the answer to this. Could I have been God if I had thought of it before God did? If even now, after it has been thought of and done at least once, if I could find out how it was done, could I not go somewhere behind God's back and do it all over again? If I find how the trick is pulled, maybe I could pull it myself. And with refinements. To do it myself would be the highest pleasure imaginable. To find out how it was done, even if I could not do it myself, would be the second highest pleasure imaginable. And an ancillary question is, why does God overdo it? Why does he do more than is required of him? My grandfather told me that when he was in high school, there were only 2 subatomic particles, the proton and the electron. And when his grandfather was in high school, there were no subatomic particles at all. The atom was then, as its name indicates, the indivisible smallest of particles. My question is, does God overdo it? Does he do more than is required of him? Maybe he only fills in the more minute items of his creation when mankind is on the verge of being able to discover them. That being so, could I not become at least an apprentice God somewhere, doing only what is necessary to stay one step ahead of my own not very well informed creatures? I'd be like the new teacher who studies enough every night to be able to stay ahead of his students in the assignments for the next day. Yes. And then there are these 333 only slightly less cardinal questions. Cinderella Schultz, the first wife of Seamus Aignach, had her own set of almost archetypical questions, such as, may it not be that we are only token people or under people or even manufactured mechanical people whom the real people have set here in their places for either 7 or 70 or 700 years, while they, the real people, withdraw somewhere and meditate and renew their souls? May it not be that the universe which we see about us is only a token or under-universe, because our token or benighted eyes will not allow us to see or understand the real universe? May it not be that even our thoughts and reflections and speculations, even those of mine, are only dim reflections of reflections? Hey, reflections of reflections is funny, and are not real? May it not be that when the 7 or 70 or 700 years are over, we will be jammed into tram cars and sped away to a big prop warehouse until the real people want to go on another meditation and will bring us out and set us in their places again? But Cinderella was a pleasantly ambivalent person who could entertain her husband's main interest in life questions as well as her own, and now she commented on Seamus's last speculation. One thing that I bet God doesn't do is do work that has already been done, devise things that have already been devised, through not knowing just what has already been done. Oh, I read all your notebooks, Seamus, so I know what you're thinking about. I read all your correspondence, even your correspondence with Pandora Riviera. You have no right to read my correspondence with Pandora, you say, and I answer you, you have no right to have a correspondence with Pandora. I run brain scans on you at night. You were wondering this morning what made the sore spots on your head. It's the brain prods that I use that make the sore spots, honey. And moreover, you talk in your sleep. I am becoming quite interested in these questions myself. But when you waste time in areas that have already been covered, then you waste my time too. I suggest that you set up an institute to see just what other people have discovered in these fields. There is a caution here, of course. Institutes are the human equivalents of computers, and all computers are atheists, or at least agnostics, which is to say that they are narrow-minded. It can't be helped. You are the only one of the 10 richest persons in the world who doesn't have an institute of his own. How will you ever have your own universe if you don't first have your own institute to keep you informed on the state of your quest? So, Seamus Eggnock set up an institute to correlate all known information on a certain group of questions, and by definition, Cinderella's definition, his institute would be somewhat narrow-minded. Fairyland is nothing but the sunny country of common sense. Modern minor poets are naturalists and talk about the bush or the brook, but the singers of the old epics and fables were supernaturalists and talked about the gods of brook and bush. G.K. Chesterton. Nothing is gained by picturing God as jealously hiding from his creatures the innermost structure of his creation. Indeed, a worthier conception of a supreme being should imply that no ultimate boundary should be set to the knowledge of beings to whom an infinite desire of knowledge has been given. The existence of an absolute ignoramus would form an exceedingly vexing problem to the philosophical mind. It would be a great step forward in philosophy if the burden of this bewildering problem could be thrown off. Unanswerable questions? Moritz Schlick. Oh, the reports from your new institute are most interesting, said Pandora Riviera, the second wife of Seamus Eggnock. Ah, certainly I read all the reports from your institute before you read them, Seamus, and I read all your notebooks and correspondence, even your correspondence with Anima Rubicunda Mannerly. You have no right to read my correspondence with Anima Rubicunda, you say, and I answer you, you have no right to have a correspondence with Anima Rubicunda. The straight stuff that the Institute has dug up for you is pretty bland. But I love the things that the Institute despises, the material that it classifies as dogs, as shaggy dogs, and as the ultimate in shaggy dogs. Yes, Seamus Eggnock was married to Pandora Riviera now. The death of his first wife, Cinderella Schultz, had had a sad touch to it, as well as a comic touch, and Seamus was sure that Cinderella sometimes laughed at the irony of it now that she was dwelling with the blessed. What must I do to convince you that you should put Bremer safety, closed doors, on all your hot dog tram cars? Cinderella had asked Seamus once, and she had asked him 1,000 times. Well, ultimately she did what she had to do to convince him. But it was an accident, and she hadn't intended it to happen. And after Cinderella's mangling death from one of the non-Bremer, non-safety closed doors of one of the hot dog tram cars, Seamus did put genuine Bremer safety closed doors on all the cars. He had liked Cinderella a lot, but he didn't especially miss her now, 2 days later. Pandora was so much like Cinderella that the transition was almost automatic. Seamus took an item from the pile of material classified as the ultimate in shaggy dogs that Pandora indicated to him. It quacked when he picked it up, for some wag at the Institute had attached the quacker from a toy duck to it. Ah, it is not a shaggy dog at all, Seamus mused to himself. It is a shaggy duck. So much the better. It is not too late for you to be God, the items shouted in loud print, and then the text of the quackery went on. Anybody can be God. Yes, anybody. And I can show you how. But will God play King of the Mountain, you ask? Will he cut off our hands and our heads when we reach for it? Probably not. I did not react that way when I was God, and I do not believe that the present, the solving of the real meaning of the word present leads to other solutions, that the present monarch will react in such a manner either. It only evades the issue to say God is already God. He had the job sewed up. The God who is already God, who already has the job sewed up, can well be you. Time is nothing so narrow as a straight line, and happening is not so shallow as to offer no alternatives to itself. Every point in time can be both the beginning and the end of time, can both precede and succeed all things else whatsoever. Every point in space can contain both all space and all time. The answer to the mystery of matter. Why should there even be so cumbersome a thing as matter? Why did the word have to be made flesh? Was not the making of matter rather a cheap and also difficult trick for a spirit to indulge in? The answer to this contains the answer to the question, how did God get to be God? Every thought can contain omnipotence and omniscience and omnipresence and omnicaritas. Be that thought, be that word, be that God. How does one get to be God? You may have asked yourself, and the answer is that one gets to be God by sending for my lessons, How to Be God. I myself was God for 9 aeons, and now I wish to aid my fellow men in sharing this wonderful experience. Order today. Make checks out to the man who used to be God. Box 10,000, the number of the larger millennium, Los Angeles. Seamus sent for the lessons without informing his institute that he was doing so. The lessons didn't teach him how to be God, but they did put him on the track of other literature that ultimately answered the question for him. The Institute did come up with the information that there were about 100,000 groups in the world. The groups averaged about 100 persons each, devoted to finding answers to the same group of questions that Seamus Eagnoch himself had been trying to answer. 100,000 times 100 persons is only a drop in the bucket of the world, but it did make Seamus feel a little less alone. Oh, when will somebody drop that first shoe? The wife of Seamus was asking. There is an old joke about somebody waiting for the second shoe to drop. Oh, that's nothing like waiting for the first one. If somebody doesn't drop it today, I may have to do it myself. Oh, by the way, Seamus, there are complaints of obviously dead people racing along our lines and even crossing our lines in defiance of light speed laws. Some of our regular customers don't like it. Why should the dead get to ride? They ask. Let them walk like they always did. The destination of these wild tram cars is to the Turpentine Groves or else. But we have no such destination listed. Seamus and his wife lived in a simple 5-level penthouse atop the Happy Hot Dog Worldwide Rapid Transit Tramway System tower, and theirs was a happy home. Their penthouse was, from a recent notion of Seamus, always filled with the sound of harp music now. This pleased him so much that today he had the same harping sounds built into all the tramcars for the joy of the riders. The hot dog trams had always been happy trams, and now they would be even happier. So Seamus grew in knowledge of the ultimate things, and he grew in confidence that someday soon, maybe even today, he'd have the ultimate answers. Well, the Institute has picked up the sound of the first shoe dropping, Anima Rubicunda Mannerly, the third wife of Seamus Eggnock, said, and it certainly is a thumping cobble of folk mythology. By the way, Seamus, there are sizable checks being received from the Turpentine Groves Rapid Transit Tramways for the use of our right-of-ways, but we show no leasing arrangement with any such company. Well, as I always say, checks are checks, however much tainted. And what about that first shoe, Anima Rubicunda? I just told you, they've dropped it. You weren't listening. Yes, Seamus Eggnock was now married to Anima Rubicunda Mannerly. She was of that Jungian archetype known as the reeking red soul, also known as the strawberry blonde, which Jung himself considered to be frightful beyond compare, but which many people like to look at and have around the house. The death of the second wife of Seamus, Pandora Riviera, had had a poignant touch to it as well as an amusing touch, and Seamus was sure that Pandora, she had been dead for nearly 2 days now, often smiled about it as she bowed with the blessed. What must I do to convince you that you should put override push buttons on all the controls that are designated positively no override? Pandora had asked him once, and she had asked him 1,000 times. And after Pandora's mangling death while trying to push an override push button that wasn't there, Seamus did put the override push buttons in all the tramcars that used the positively no override controls. Seamus had liked Pandora a lot, but he didn't especially miss her 2 days later. Anima Rubicunda was so much like Pandora that the transition had been almost automatic. What did the first shoe consist of, modified light of my life? Seamus asked Anima Rubicunda now. Oh, the folkloric sort of information that the answers to your ultimate questions do exist, that they are written out boldly in a book that anybody may order, that one may read the answers to the questions and understand them and be delighted with them, and then one dies immediately in the fullness of that delight. This detail has bugged some people away from reading the answers in the book, but it seems fair enough to me, since the only ones who will learn of the books and find the answers are those who have devoted their lives to searching for those answers. It is only just that their lives should end when their life's purpose has been fulfilled. Well, let's get the book then, Anima, Seamus said. I've got it. Here it is. It cost me $50,000, and you can pay me back now if you wish. I've read it, I understand it, and am delighted. Do thou likewise. Anima Rubicunda didn't look dead. Seamus took a $50,000 bill from his billfold and paid her. Then he examined the book. It's written in Ladino or Sephardic, he said. My husband, I'd always assumed that you were educated, Anima Ruby said. If not, then it's all over with us. Don't you know Sephardic? Can't you read it? I don't know. I never tried it. I know Old Spanish, of course, and I know Hebrew. I'll just go and take a half-hour lesson in Sephardic from a Sephardic expert I know. Then I'll come back and read the book. I'll not wait for you. I'll go ahead and get things ready for the trip. Oh, Seamus, what if your first wife, Cinderella, was right? What if we are only token people? Will we have only a token God then? I'm not sure. Maybe the real God is father of gods and men and computers, and of token people also. Where are we going? Oh, you may come to understand that after you read the book. What's that thing on the sofa there? It looks rather like a mannequin made to resemble you. Yes, something like that. I'll see you in the tram. Seamus went and took a half-hour lesson in Sephardic, a language that is Old Spanish written in Hebrew characters and used yet by some of the Jews of Istanbul, a city that is the Los Angeles of the Near East when it comes to quackery. Then he came back and read the book. He found all the ultimate answers in it, plainly written out. He understood the answers and was delighted with them, and he didn't feel at all dead. The name of the book that gave the answers and the delight was The Terebinth Groves of Mamre. Terebinto was the word in Sephardic as it is in Spanish. Oh, that's wonderful, Seamus cried out. The terebinth tree is only the turpentine bush, a runty little tree at best, and the reputation of turpentine as a cure-all for diseases is much diminished in modern times, and yet I believe, as did our ancestors, as I know now with my new illumination, that turpentine is the smell of life itself. In the turpentine trees was one of the places where the Father of Gods and men in computers and maybe of token people also made pleasant and open promises which he would keep. It's one of the places like a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, or a habitation of dragons and a court of owls that sing out of the old Bible and are a delight even to imagine. Ah, there's a mannequin intended to represent me, sitting on the floor beside the sofa, on which reposes the mannequin of my wife, Anima Ruby. And my dummy holds the hand of Anima's dummy in its own. Oh, I feel wonderful. I have never been so far from death in my life. And now for a trip, in a tramway, I believe. Seamus descended from his 5-level penthouse into the Happy Hot Dog Worldwide Rapid Transit System Tower below it. It will be given me at this moment to know which tram to take, he said, and then he knew that he had spotted the right one. It had the most amazing device on it, the device that would permit it to go in 2 opposite directions at the same time. Seamus himself had now worked unsuccessfully on this device for 12 years, but somebody had now worked it out perfectly. How has this been done on a tramcar and I have not done it? He asked himself. The classification card on the tramcar read, 4th Class Cargo, 7-Day Wonders. This card was placed askew, and the previous card could still be read, 3rd Class Cargo, Turpentine. Seamus entered the tramcar. I will not serve. Lucifer. If we be not the people, yet when will the people come? And every morning falls the dew, in 7 years it's gone. Nemo. There was an incredible number of persons in the tramcar, and yet it was not crowded. How can this be? Seamus Aegnoch asked, neither to himself nor yet out loud, for the distinctions between such sorts of utterances had now disappeared. How can there be such a number of persons here and it not crowded? It has to be crowded, and it isn't. Bodies take up room. Ah, that's it. We are not here in our bodies. My own body was left beside that of my third wife, Anima Ruby, in our penthouse. And I thought they were mere mannequins. Well, I'll say this. I feel more alive in death than I ever felt in my life. And there are 3 persons I know both wisely and well. I am fortunate in my wives. Ah, there, Anima Ruby, how many of the sizable checks were received from the Turpentine Groves Rapid Transit tramways? About 3 million of them, Seamus, and that was just for half a day. I believe they must have used some sort of preternatural cars to transport the dead people or made them walk before our cars became sophisticated enough for them to use. This makes us the richest people in the world, with what we already had. Well, it's something to be the richest people in the world, even if we're no longer in it. The piped-in harp music must have gotten their business for us. The three wives of Seamus were sitting at a club car table with a deck of glory cards before them. "Come, take a hand and pass an aeon with us." The first wife of Seamus, Cinderella, spoke, and she winked, and Seamus sat with them. "Tell me one thing," he began, "if you know it." "Certainly we know it, whatever it is," the wife Pandora Riviera said with that lilt that was her vocal signature. "This is the particular judgment going on right now, and at the particular judgment people are given all knowledge of particulars. If we're only token people, as Cinderella here thinks might be the case, then this is the token particular judgment, and we are given such knowledge of particulars as applies to token persons. Oh, you with your tramway mind are wondering who worked out the device to permit this car to go in two opposite directions at the same time. The device on which you worked unsuccessfully for 12 years. We told God about it, that you had worked on it for 12 years. "I bet I can work it out in 12 minutes, he said. He did, but just barely. "When did he work it out in just 12 minutes?" Seamus asked. "It was either 7,000 or 7 billion years ago," said Anima Ruby, the third wife. "Your clay is not quite cold yet, Seamus, so the full illumination is a bit tardy coming to you, but you'll have it all soon. We are now in the state of re-entrant time and re-entrant space, and re-entrant size, and re-entrant persons, and re-entrant cause and effect, the state that makes becoming a god possible. When re-entrant size prevails, a brain that is normally no more than 2,000 cc in bulk may well be many light years across, especially when it has become an immaterial brain. When re-entrant time prevails, there are eons upon eons available. When re-entrant personhood prevails, everybody becomes potentially divine. In this vale of tears and chuckles here below, up there below, most of us were truly only token or mustard seed persons, with only token or mustard seed minds. But each mustard seed mind may expand to a billion powers of a billion and become a spacious tree full of birds. Where re-entrant creation prevails, creation can happen both before anything else has happened and after everything else has happened. I see that it is coming to you now, Seamus, and wave after wave of illumination is washing over you." Seamus and his three wives played a four-handed game with the glory cards. There are 666 cards in a pack of glory cards. All are unnumbered face cards, and each has its special powers. Only illuminated persons are brainy enough to play with such cards. Strange feelings did come to Seamus then in the crowding waves of illumination. There were headaches whose radii had to be measured in billions of parsecs. There were responsibilities hard enough to rend a million skies. Talk about mind stretching. There was a mind being stretched clear around the universes hundreds of times every second. There was a cosmic juggling act going on that required the juggler to be all-knowing and all-powerful and all-just and all-present and all-loving. Did you ever try to be all-loving and all-just at the same time, even for an instant? There was a mind, and it impinged on every mind in the tramcar, and perhaps in the whole universe, that had to mark the fall of every sparrow, that had to check out the health of every mite on every sparrow, and the tonic health of every microbe on every mite, and this on as many billions of worlds, not just on one. There was a mind that had to know and nourish every subatomic particle everywhere, and there were many orders of such particles much smaller than are generally known about. Well, every mind is as much the center of the cognitional universe as every other mind, and in the quirks of time and person and development, one of them may already have outgrown, all the others. This most stretched of minds may be your own, and you just have not noticed it yet. It's fun, though, for everybody except the workhorse, Seamus said. What? What? Are there some persons in this tramcar who don't find it fun? Why not? Why not? Oh, it's my amazing device that permits the tram to go in two opposite directions at the same time. My own amazing device that I'd have invented if God hadn't beaten me to it. We are not all going in the same direction on this tram, I see, and we are not all going in delight. Some of us are already in heaven, and some of us already in hell, to use the old vulgar names of the places, and yet we're all riding in the same tramcar until the harvest. But this is the harvest. I can hear the whetted scythes cutting the wheat and the tares, the sheep and the goats together. And how will they separate them after they're mown? I'd better pay attention and see. What is it that those glum and angry other sorts of persons are saying? We will not serve, we will not serve, they mutter over and over again. I hope it does not come to me either, but I'd be afraid to say out loud that I reject it. Some of those undelighted ones must be the cream of the crop to have it offered to them. Ah, I see now that not every person could make it as God, but perhaps one in every billion could, and there are a handful of billions in this tramcar. What? Have all refused it? That was an interval of either 5 aeons or 5 seconds. When time is re-entrant, those intervals are about the same. And still there hasn't been a traffic in the highest position of all. Those who lack the scope for it are not asked, and those spacious ones who might possibly do it have all refused it in gloom and anger and fear. And what is it that several wrathy persons who may perhaps be outside of the tramcar are grumbling? Well, damn it, the wrathy persons are grumbling. Get with it. On with the continuity and go easy on the side jabber. If you know it, tell it. What is the answer? How did God get to be God? Oh, he got to be God by default. And now he has to be God until either 7 or 7 billion years have passed, or until he can find another person who will still want to be God after he has become illuminated and informed about the whole situation. He hasn't found him yet,